Hello guys, I'm Su. Today I'm going to talk about the topic of why the West is so extreme and full of extremists. I know it's going to be a controversial topic, and it's not going to be easy topic, but I'll try to make it as simple and understandable as possible. From my perspective, everything in the West is so extreme. You have a left wing, you have right wing, you have left wing that can be easily pushed to far left, and you have right wing easily be pushed to far right. You have Nazis, you have communists, you have hardcore fascists, and you have hardcore anti-fascists. You have liberals that believe in absolute freedom and individualism, absolute individualism, and you have people who believe in tribalism and communitarianism, etc. And all these things look very extreme to me, and they conflict with each other, also in a very extreme way. In my opinion, there are three origins of extremism in the West, which in turn are anthropological origin, religious origin, and cultural, linguistic origin. Let me talk about anthropological origin first. What is so-called modern Western civilization built on? Social contract. What is social contract? Well, it presupposes natural state, that human beings fight each other just like animals to animals, like wolves to wolves. We bite each other, like, just want everybody, want each other to die or something. And at certain points that, we believe that killing is enough, that we need to make some social contract. Actually, this is very extreme. It's very extreme. We are not all saints. We are not Jesus Christ. We're not moral idols or something, but we are also not animals. Both are too extreme, and social contract is based on assuming all human beings are wild animals. This is just one extreme. And for a moment, I can't accept this idea. In the same way as I cannot accept Karl Marx's idea of class struggle in the beginning, because in ancient Chinese history, there is nothing called class struggle. It simply didn't exist. Then I wonder why Karl Marx invented this term of class struggle. Then I started to read his Das Kapital, and then I understood. From Das Kapital, he told you that in the 16th century in England, when the ancient feudalism was transformed into capitalism, all the farmers' lands get expropriated. All the farmers lost their land, and this is not something nice. This is very extreme. They don't allow the farmers to keep not even a small piece of land. This is all expropriated, and the many people become homeless. And if you're homeless, and if you cannot work, or you don't want to work for the capitalists, and then there's not too many choices for you, actually, because if you want to if you want to be a beggar, you actually need a beggar license, and if you don't have a beggar license, you will be considered as illegal, and according to the laws, something very, very shitty will happen to you, actually. If for the first time they catch you as illegal, they will bind you on the horse cart and whip you until all the blood coming out of your body. And for the second time they catch you as illegal, they actually cut your ear. And for the third time they catch you, is death penalty, is execution. You're dead. If capitalism started in England in this very bloody and extreme way, it's natural to think of the consequence that the reactions from the suppressed people can also be very extreme. This is so natural. Then I suddenly understand why Hegel invented the dialectics, the thesis, antithesis. I firstly thought this way of thinking was very extreme, like either thesis or antithesis, or thesis or give birth to antithesis, and they fight each other and giving birth to synthesis. I thought it was very extreme. It's not necessary to think in this way, especially if you have read Immanuel Kant. Actually, Kant refused this kind of either this or that extreme. Kant is kind of mild thinker that reject both extremes. But when Hegel invented dialectics, I firstly didn't understand why he became so extreme and just disfollow what Immanuel Kant said. But when I acknowledged this European historical fact, I suddenly understood that Hegel was just describing the historical facts, realities. He can do nothing about it. He cannot help with it. He was just describing it. By the way, I find capitalism's liberal democracy's statement on private property so ironic. It claims to protect private property. It claims that private property is divine. Apparently, it was not divine until you steal it by force. Then it becomes divine. When the private lands were within the hands of Aboriginal Indians in America, it was not divine. But if you come and conquer them and genocide them and took them, and then it becomes divine. Actually, the system that I find is really protecting the private property, protect the divinity of private property, was ancient China, actually. Because in any founding new dynasty of China, the state always redistribute land to the farmers. In Tang Dynasty, for example, every Chinese citizen who reaches the age of 18 will receive 100 mu land from the state. And 1 mu is 666 square meters. And nobody can take your land by force. And this is divinity of private property. It's the divinity of private property of every citizen in the country. Not just a few oligarchies or not just one class, but everyone, for everyone. Here comes to the topic of the problem of legitimacy that I want to talk about. The Western society was built on two kinds of legitimacy. First, violence, like invasion, war, conquer, brutal forces. If I used brutal forces to conquer you, if I win in the war when I invade you, then I gain legitimacy automatically. I have absolute legitimacy in this society. The second is debt. Well, this is something Michael Hudson talked about before, about the debt tradition in the oligarchy West, that the oligarchy feudalism refused to forgive farmers of their debts, even when such debts was not their fault. It was played, it was manipulated by the landlords, by the oligarchs, but such depth has kind of sanctity, divinity anyway. But the Western society doesn't have the legitimacy of natural human rights, of human ethics. It doesn't have it. It doesn't have it at all. When Tang Dynasty redistribute land to every citizen in China, it's exercising kind of natural human rights as the founding legitimacy of a society for Chinese at the time. But in the West, when the capitalism rises, the capitalists just took over all the land and do not care about the farmers and ordinary people, and they themselves become the new feudal oligarchs, the feudal landlords. In comparison, the ancient Chinese society was built on three legitimacy. Legitimacy of the sky, is called justice, legitimacy of justice, and legitimacy of humanity, which means human ethics, legitimacy of human ethics, and legitimacy of historical culture, of historical cultural facts as historical cultural legacies as legitimacy of a founding society. Every time when a new dynasty was founded, it of course started with violence, as revolutions, as revolt against the chaotic situations of the terrible situations. But this violence was used only to achieve better equality and justice. And this is how people would agree with this founding dynasty in the first place. If this founding, if the founders of dynasty didn't achieve the promises of justice, of the redistribution of lands, etc., to Chinese people, then Chinese people wouldn't accept this dynasty in the first place. This is about justice, about ethics, and the historical cultural tradition of Chinese people. Another anthropological fact of why European social legitimacy was so much founded on violence and brutality was its climate, its geography. Actually, if you look at Northern Europe, it's very cold, a lot of tribes, and things do not grow well, and if it's very cold winter, these northern barbarians like Vikings, Germans, etc., will just go south and steal food and rob and invade whatever. It's just like Mongolians in the ancient time that invaded China and genocide and rob stuff, etc. It's like in Game of Thrones, Jon Snow said, winter is coming. And when winter is coming, it's not something nice. The White Walkers come and destroy everything, everyone. So for ancient Europe, winter is coming, and it's disasters for the Mediterranean area, for sure. It's always so interesting for me to see that Karl Marx, in his late years, start to be so interested in anthropology. He tries to research and write on anthropology, although he was unable to finish it before he dies. When you research on barbarians, on savages, you research anthropology. When you research on cultivated human and human civilization, you research on history. When you research on China, you research on history. When you research on Europe, it makes much more sense to research on anthropology. The problems for barbarians is that they do not trust in humanity. They don't trust there's such thing called altruistic nature. They don't believe in this thing because they don't have it. They believe everyone is selfish because that's how they live. They can only accept something called social contract. They can only be extremists. They expect you to also be extremists, to fight against them, to fight with them till one certain part wins and makes social contract. By the way, I find the ancient Rome's treatment of slaves very brutal. They put them in Colosseums, actually, to let them fight with the animals and die in it. It's so brutal. And in comparison, in China at the time, Han Dynasty, they also had slaves. I don't reject that. They also had slaves, but they treat slaves very well, actually. The life of slaves in Han Dynasty of China is even better than the employees in big international corporations in our time. The slaves in Han Dynasty were allowed to get paid by their owners. They get paid by their owners, and they were allowed to own private property. They have private property, and they ride on horses, on cart, on the street, in a very cool way, that's it's even like showing off, and they just do business for their masters, and in the end of the day they get paid. Actually, many Chinese girls in Han Dynasty, their biggest dream in their life was to be slaves, because then they will get very beautiful clothes to wear, just like the popular stars in our time. And just go to the street and walk by their master and do business and stuff. It's almost like a luxury life for them. They enjoy it so much. And there were laws that forbid the masters to abuse or torture slaves in Han Dynasty. And if you do that, it can result in serious consequences. You will get punished by law, even as a master. Now I want to talk about the second region of extremism in the West, the religious region. When Jesus spent his lifetime in Palestine, he brought hope and many good things. In China, this kind of person would start a revolt and become the founding king of a new dynasty, actually. But in Jerusalem, he was crucified by the Romans from the West, very unfortunately. But the Roman Empire found it difficult to remove the influence of Jesus Christ. They find it impossible to remove him from people's mind. So what they did was to rewrite this religion, to completely destroy and remove the original followers and believers, and make a fake Bible and claim that Jesus is God. This is the strategy of tyranny. If he kills someone that is really loved by people and cannot get rid of his influence, then the tyranny just choose another strategy to idolize this person, to say, yeah, he's God. Everyone must worship him. This is just a way to distract people from the terrible sin this tyranny has committed. He also wants people to forget about his sins and to not revenge in the future. So he makes up the story of that Jesus was sacrificed to pay for the sins of all sinners, and we are all sinful. Even when I have committed terrible sins and you haven't, but you are also sinful, because we were all born as sinful and with original sin. And this nonsense was invented by St. Augustine. So the Roman tyrannies originally invented these fanatic thoughts to exculpate themselves, to prevent themselves from being hated, being revenged. And later all these fanatical thoughts become the roots of extremism in Catholic Christianity. Christianity is very extreme. If someone hits your left face and you say, "I hit my right face, please," well, this is not human reaction. This is even beyond fanaticism. This is sadomasochistic. This is a masochisticism. This is so sick and perverted. It also gives non-believers a wrong message. The message is, if someone behaves nicely, humble, kind, then he's probably a Christian. Then you can just abuse him, do bad things to him, be sadistic to him, because he will enjoy it and ask you to give him more anyway. Roman Christianity has something very sick, very evil in its core. It somehow believes Satan. Satan is stronger than God in our world. So our world is ruled by Satan. So we should just be Satan's slave or something. Or, I mean, if you don't want to be Satan's slave, then you just put hope in the next life, in the life after your death, because after you are dead, it's heaven, where God is the boss. But in our world, unfortunately, Satan is the boss. This way of thinking justifies all the evil, all the crimes in our world, and just ask people to give up and not to fight against this evil. And this is absolutely Satanism. And I also really dislike Christianity's very negative attitude towards human society. It believes that human society, our society, is doomed to be a fallen one. It's falling. It's terrible. As if a fallen state is a normal state, but a prospering state is not normal. This is very sick. It's very sick. In Chinese culture, a fallen state is not a normal state, but a prospering one is normal. And if a society is not prospering and is falling, then it means this society is sick. Then anyone who has morality, who has hope in humanity, must try everything to make it better, to help to cure this society, to cure this sick society. There's a famous saying for Confucius: worry before everyone else in this society worries, and be happy after everyone in the society is happy. It's kind of responsibility for their super intelligent Confucians, that they must try everything to improve the society, to destroy the evil, and to build something good in the society, to make the society prosper. Actually, I see many American movies very connected to Christian thinking, and it's very sick. It's very sick, and it's very extreme, in my opinion. For example, in Batman and Dark Knight, you have the Joker, who did all the shit to Gotham, and you have Batman, who always refuse to kill the Joker. For what? For what? For his value? For his principle? What is his value? So his value is to let a criminal survive, to let a criminal always live, at the cost of letting hundreds of thousands of innocent people die? Is this his value? Well, this is not value. This is not human value. This is anti-human value. And this is very extreme. And also I want to talk a bit about European death penalty laws. There's no death penalty in European laws. And also European prison is like luxury hotels in many cases. And they say, well, to protect the human rights of criminals and to improve them, to make them a better human being, something. Okay, so so you care so much about the human rights of criminals, but you don't care about the life of innocent people. You just want to show people that, well, killing innocent people is nothing, you know, it doesn't cause death penalty, so you can just do it, no problem. This is very sick. This is so sick and evil, in my opinion. And it's extremism in its core and Christian in its roots. Now I want to talk about the third origin of extremism in the West, the cultural linguistic origin. Heidegger once said, the idealistic tradition of the West can be traced back to ancient Greece, to Plato, for Plato's idealism. Plato believes that there's a separate, independent world of ideas, and our world, the phenomenal world, is like the imitation of it, just like shadows on the wall, something like that. The idealistic thinking is highly reductive thinking. It just feels like it removes all the clothes of a person, and even that's not enough. You have to remove the flesh as well, and there's only bones and skeleton left. This way of thinking is so extreme, and in the West I find many people think in this way, this habitual reductive thinking that goes to a very extreme, and then they just easily transform something into another thing, to reduce all so-called irrelevant elements from a thing, and then just label it as another thing. And then you don't know he's talking about anymore. Then he easily falls into conflict with others, because the other part was using the same reductive strategy to demonize his objects as well. This is disaster, actually, this reductive thinking of idealistic thinking. But my point is that this problem does not only exist in Plato's idealism, but also in Latin language, in the language itself, actually. In Latin, you have objectum, subjectum, projectum, which in English is object, subject, project. The objectum, to throw something on it, throw on it. Subjectum, throw below, throw something below. Projectum, throw something forward, throw something forward. This language itself is too abstract, too reductive, and only express the logical relations of things, and is detached from the sensual grasping, sensual experience. Actually, this language itself is like a skeleton. It's like a skeleton without flesh, without cloth. It's just a skeleton. When you use this language too often, you're unconsciously objectifying so much and being reductive so much. And this is very harmful to human temper, actually. It's useful to express the logical relations of your topic, but it's harmful to your temper, actually. Especially when you habitually objectify, and you objectify anything, including the human being in front of you, and you are actually dehumanizing him at the same time. And this language is also unconsciously projecting in many cases, and the process of projecting is also an extreme one. It is not only extreme, but also self-deceptive in many cases. For me, I find Latin language too abstract and too anti-intuitional, and I also find it a very good language for conducting scientific research, but a very bad language for the development of humanity. And when I say the development of humanity, I mean to be mild human beings that feel each other's feelings, senses through language, and care about each other, regardless of races, and not to be extremists that behave like savages, that project the self-hatred on whoever is not white and commit suicide, commit genocide. Now I want to talk about the consequence of extremism that happens to individuals. I once joined an online cafe for philosophical discussion. There were many people present, and I believe I mentioned something about the genocide of the Aboriginal Indians in America. And actually this topic triggered someone, a Canadian from far right wing. He was really triggered and he was really angry. His face turned into red, and he started to shout in front of camera, very angrily, outrageously actually, and even shout something like morons are stupid. We are going to defeat you. We are winning, or we win something. I don't know what happened to that guy, but he looks very fanatic, and it seems that he realized how he behaves, and it's a bit embarrassing for him. And then he suddenly pretends that he's not angry. He just put a smile on his face, but his face is still red, and there's still full of hatred, outrage expressions on his face. And he say, "Oh, why you are so angry? Why you are so outrageous? Because you are weak. See, you are weak. Why you are so weak? Why are you so angry?" Well, that's very embarrassing. Actually, it's very embarrassing for himself. And everyone else didn't say anything. Just let him be. But I said something. Actually, I said, "Well, congratulations for being strong. Then we are weak. It doesn't matter as long as you are strong." This kind of behavior is not unusual to be seen. From my personal experience, I met quite a lot of far right-wing white. They behave in this way, actually. When they get triggered by something, they lose their attitude. They become like crazy men. And later they just say, "Oh, you behave like that." Through their self-projection on the other side, just in front of everyone. And it's so embarrassing for these people themselves, actually. These people, in my opinion, get a bit personality split problems. It's like at certain moments their personality splits into two, and they cannot handle themselves anymore. One contradicts the other, and the splitted two are tearing him apart, actually. This split personality problem, in my opinion, has something to do with liberal society's individualism. For me, both individualism and collectivism would result in the closing of individual's mind. If one can deal with two human relationships in a good way, he wouldn't get these problems. He would see the other person as another I trapped in another body. And if he can see the other person as another I, then he can live in harmony with himself, actually. But if he sees another person as an absolutely external object, then hell is others. Then everyone else becomes a burden on him. And it causes his ego to dysfunction. Collective totalitarianism also cannot build a healthy mindset, an open mind, so to speak, because it does not distinguish between I and we. So I as a subject is absent in this case. It also causes serious problems. That's why I believe both individualism and collectivism are too extreme, and both of them lead to the closing of individual mind. And in the case of individualism, one easily built his ego, built his absolute ego, and he actually worships his ego in order to make it stronger. But one's ego cannot be infinitely stronger, and when it reaches a certain point, it's gonna explode. It just splits into two, like what I described before. And when this split happens, it's like nuclear fission or cell division. You know, in nuclear fission, there's a nucleus, and there's a neutron. And when a neutron hits the central nucleus, it can cause the nucleus to split. And if a person is so close-minded, is so self-centered, and constantly enclose himself more and more, and lives with his ego, and only embolden his ego, it's very dangerous, actually, because eventually his ego will be hit by something, either by himself or by some random occurrences, just like how a nucleus is hit by a neutron. I personally invented a terminology for this phenomenon, and I call it oval effect. Like a round circle has a tendency to split into two, to expand into oval circle first and then split into two. Everything in our universe has this tendency, actually. You don't see any perfect circle in our world. You see eggs are oval, planets are oval, atoms are oval, leaves are oval, and indeed every round thing is actually oval. It's not pure round. And human being can also not escape from this natural phenomenon of oval effect, in my opinion, that an absolute individual with his enclosed ego will eventually naturally become oval and split into two. He cannot help with this tendency. This is natural. The only way to deal with this problem is to live as a social animal, to live in harmonious relationship with others, to live with humanity. Because the moment you see another person as another I in another body and have this ample empathy on him, actually your mind becomes very wide. Your mind expands. It's not a narrow, enclosed ego anymore. It's a big relief. This is a unique solution for unique human problems. Since we are different from animals, we are human, and we have unique human problems, and this way of building two-person harmonious relationship is a good way to solve this unique human problem. Actually, I mentioned the ethical regulation of two human relationship in my second video, why the modern West falls into nihilism, and I explained clearly that how Confucius' regulation of two human relationship solve their human society problems in a very good way and makes a society live in harmony with within itself, actually. Actually, in the early 20th century or before, you never heard of any Chinese getting mental problems. I asked my parents' generation, my parents' parents' generation before, and They told me this: the older generations never had mental problems, never get mental problems, but just after 1949, and also after 1978, in the so-called capitalism time, all the mental problems rises. Chinese get a lot of mental problems. Chinese get a lot of mental problems, just like the Western people do. You don't know where they come from, but they just rises. And by the way, the idea of worshipping one's own ego, absolute ego, is the idea from Nietzsche. This is a very bad idea, in my opinion. Because Nietzsche kind of despises those who worship this god or that god, this idol or that idol. So he believes that perhaps worship one's own ego is the best solution. It feels more like a Superman that overcomes this slave or morality or whatever. But worshipping one's own ego, in my opinion, is not too different from worshipping another human being, a master, so to speak. The fact that you choose to be a slave to your own ego is not too different from choosing to be a slave to an external master, to a tyranny, to a bully, to a brutal force, whatever. For me, I never take egoistic people seriously. In the West, you have a lot of egoistic people with big, huge egos, and they are very arrogant, and they believe they have their master mindset. And if you are not like them, you are a slave to them or something. They believe in this way. But I just feel sorry for these people. I just feel sorry. I find them so pathetic. They just project their slavishness on other people. Actually, I believe egoistic people have serious traumas in their life. Maybe it's traumas from the church, like they've been abused in the Christian church, or abused by their parents when they were young, or being bullied in a school or something. And it makes them become kind of slavish, and they want to hide it. So they create an ego and choose to be slave to their own egos, and later project this master-slave relationship to other innocent people. But for me, I really despise those people who are slavish and who behave like bullies, but who are deeply dumb slaves. That's why in the American series Game of Thrones, I admire one person most, which is Hound. The Hound. He has a monstrous brother, the Mountain. He was bullied seriously by him when he was little, and he eventually chose to revenge against him. He didn't care about anything else. He first serves Cersei, and later he didn't like her and chose other ways, and eventually he didn't want to serve anyone anything, and he just want to take revenge on his abusive brother, and this behavior gets my respect. In the West in general, a big problem from what I see is that too many people get Stockholm syndromes. They dare not to revolt against their suppressors, but worship them instead, and project this kind of hatred, the sense of shame and pity on other races. It is a bullying chain, a slavish chain, a enslaved chain, and I always firmly reject it. And if you reject it, then you get freedom, real freedom. And then you become yourself. You get a healthy mind. Extremism, in many cases, is connected with cowardice and self-rejection. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.